Chapter 241. March 1st, 1897, Philadelphia. Amarathia. The air was crisp and cold, the streets alive with banners, the hum of conversation, and the restless anticipation of a major speech. Philadelphia was just the first stop in what would be a grueling campaign. But Matthew Hesh knew that every word he spoke tonight would define the battle ahead. Thousands had gathered outside the governor's mansion, the main square packed with citizens from all walks of life: factory workers, soldiers, small business owners, farmers, and families with children wrapped in wool coats. They were here for one reason: to see the man who had stopped a war, the man who had taken on Washington's corruption, the man who now sought another 4 years in office. Standing at the side of the stage, Matthew adjusted the cuffs of his coat, his expression calm despite the weight of the moment. Beside him, Amber placed a reassuring hand on his arm. She had been his closest confidant throughout this presidency. And today, she wasn't just the First Lady, she was his greatest ally. "You're ready?" she said softly. Matthew exhaled. "I have to be." "You always are." A staff member approached, nodding. "It's time, Mr. President." A nation worth fighting for. The cheers erupted before Matthew even reached the podium. The sound was deafening, a sea of Amarathian flags waving in the cold winter air. The roar of the people was both exhilarating and sobering. He stepped forward, raising a hand. The noise settled, replaced by an expectant silence. "My fellow Amarathians," he began, his voice strong, unwavering. "For years ago, you entrusted me with the greatest responsibility in this nation, to serve as your president. It has been the greatest honor of my life." The crowd erupted again, forcing Matthew to pause. When the noise died down, he continued, "When I took office, this country stood at the brink of corruption. Powerful men in Washington believed they could do whatever they pleased: lie, cheat, steal, and send Amarathian sons to die for their own ambitions. He let that settle. The tension in the crowd shifted. They had lived through those months. They had seen the arrests. "I stood before you then and made a promise to stop the war they were trying to force upon us, a promise to dismantle corruption, a promise to rebuild Amarathia, not for the wealthy, not for the powerful, but for the people." A cheer erupted, but Matthew held up a hand, commanding attention. "And I kept that promise." His achievements in 4 years: we have crushed the corruption that threatened our democracy, increased wages for hardworking Amarathians, rebuilt our military into a force of defense, not a tool for conquest, invested in infrastructure, education, and industry, creating jobs, paving roads, and ensuring a future for our children, protected the working class from the exploitation of the elite. These are not words, these are actions. This is what we built together. The crowd's cheers thundered through the city square. "But my friends," Matthew continued, his expression serious, "our work is far from over. And now, for the vision of the future. I stand before you today, not just to ask for your vote, but to ask for your trust." The crowd quieted. "There are those who want to take us backward, those who say Amarathia should have gone to war, those who say we should have expanded, conquered, dominated. They speak of strength, but what they really mean is power, not for the people but for themselves." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "They believe Amarathia is meant to rule through force. But I ask you, is that who we are?" A resounding no filled the air. Matthew nodded. "No, Amarathia is strongest when it stands united, when it stands for its people. And that is why I stand before you today, because I am not finished fighting for you." A pause. Then, with conviction, he declared, "I am officially running for re-election as president of Amarathia." The roar from the crowd was deafening. Flags waved. Hats were thrown in the air. People cheered until their voices cracked from excitement. Behind the scenes, the private battle begins hours later. After handshakes, meetings with local leaders, and conversations with supporters, Matthew finally found himself alone with Amber in their private quarters at the governor's mansion. She sat on the edge of the bed, slipping off her gloves, watching him with a knowing look. "You did well," she said softly. Matthew exhaled. "It's only the beginning." Amber studied him, then walked over, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You always say that, but I can see it, Matt. You're carrying more than just a campaign on your back." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Because I know what's coming." "Royce." Matthew's expression hardened. He's dangerous, Amber, more dangerous than Bradford ever was. He's not just a politician, he's a symbol for those who want Amarathia to become an empire. If he wins, everything we built will fall apart. Amber tightened her grip on him. Then we make sure he doesn't win. It won't be that easy, Matthew admitted. The Order, I can feel them. They're pulling the strings. We don't know how deep their influence runs. If they get their hands on the election, continue reading on Novelbin. Calm. Amber met his gaze, her voice unwavering. Then we fight back, harder than before. He chuckled, shaking his head. You're more ready for this than I am. Amber smirked. Always have been. He cupped her cheek, brushing a thumb against her skin. We'll be on the road for months, you and Arthur. The baby traveling like this isn't easy. Amber shrugged. Neither is being president, but here you are. Matthew laughed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Outside, the battle for Amarathia had begun, but inside, in this quiet moment, Matthew reminded himself of why he was fighting, for his family, for the people, for a future worth believing in. Meanwhile, the opposition was watching, and they too would start to clash against Hesh in the campaign period. Chapter 242. March 5, 1897, Amsterdam City, Amarathia. The streets of Amsterdam were alive with energy. Massive banners hung from buildings, red and gold flags waving in the cold breeze. People packed the city square outside the Grand Metropolitan Hall, eager to hear from the man who promised to lead Amarathia into a new era of power and dominance. Charles Alden Royce had arrived. The crowd stretched as far as the eye could see. A mix of industrialists, factory workers, military officers, and political elites. They had come to hear a speech, but in truth, this was more than a campaign rally. This was the opening salvo in a war against Matthew Hesh. Royce stepped onto the grand stage, adjusting the cuffs of his coat. His posture was relaxed, his expression calm, yet confident. He scanned the crowd, taking his time, making them wait. Then he approached the podium. The cheers were deafening. The future of Amarathia, ladies and gentlemen, Royce began, his deep voice cutting through the air. Powerful and unwavering, Amarathia is a great nation, but under our current leadership we have been forced to accept a lie. The crowd fell silent, a lie that tells us that we must be afraid of conflict, that we must be cautious in the face of opportunity, that we must let our enemies dictate our fate. Royce paused, his sharp gaze scanning the faces before him. Our current president, Matthew Hesh, claims he saved Amarathia from war. He let the words hang, but I ask you, my fellow Amarthians, did he save us? Or did he rob us of our destiny? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Royce's tone hardened. The truth is this: while the rest of the world moves forward, while nations grow, expand, and dominate, Hesh has kept Amarathia on its knees. He has weakened our military, slowed our industry, and tied our hands when we should be reaching for greatness. A wave of applause erupted. Royce smirked, letting the energy build. He knew exactly what he was doing. Let's talk about Hesh's so-called achievements, Royce continued, turning toward a massive banner that was unveiled behind him. It read, Hesh's America. Failure or fraud? He says he fought corruption? Then why is Washington still filled with backroom deals? He claims he strengthened the economy? Then why are industries struggling under heavy regulation? He says he prevented a war? Then why are foreign nations testing our borders? Seeing Amarathia as weak, the crowd roared in approval. My friends, Royce declared, gripping the podium, Hesh didn't stop a war, stopped Amarathia from taking its rightful place as the most powerful force in the world. He let that statement sink in. Strength is not found in hesitation. Royce continued, it is found in action. It is found in power. It is found in a leader who is not afraid to seize opportunity when it presents itself. A deafening chant broke out, Royce, Royce, Royce. As Royce's speech echoed across the city, the full weight of the Order's influence went to work within hours. Newspapers across the country carried headlines. Has Hesh kept Amarathia weak? Did Hesh surrender the nation's future? Charles Royce, a leader for the future? Political cartoons flooded the presses, mocking Hesh as indecisive and weak, depicting him as a leader who bowed to foreign pressure instead of taking bold action. The radio waves followed suit. Pundits questioned Hesh's leadership, presenting expert opinions that suggested Amarathia's economy was faltering under his administration. In Washington, Hesh's allies were feeling the pressure. The narrative is shifting, Collins muttered as he threw down a newspaper onto the president's desk. They're painting you as the man who let Amarathia fall behind. Matthew sat in silence, his jaw clenched. Amber, seated across from him, picked up the newspaper and read one of the editorials. Hesh speaks of peace, But peace without strength is surrender. What kind of leader refuses to seize opportunity? What kind of president leaves Amarathia stagnant? She slammed the paper down. This is war, Matt, she said. Matthew leaned forward, hands clasped. I expected this. Colin sighed. They're flooding the country with this messaging, and it's working. Royce's numbers are climbing. His speech in Amsterdam reached millions, and the opposition is starting to rally around him. Matthew exhaled slowly. So, he's challenging me? Collins nodded. More than the test demanding a debate. The next day, Royce addressed another rally in Chicago, standing before an audience of tens of thousands. If Matthew Hesh truly believes in his leadership, then I challenge him to a public debate. The crowd erupted. Let the people see the difference between us. Let them decide who has the vision to lead Amarathia into the future. He spread his arms, as if welcoming the fight. I am ready. President Hesh, are you? The challenge was sent. The trap was set. And now, the entire nation waited for Hesh's response. At the White House, Collins placed the telegram onto Matthew's desk. It's official. Royce has called you out. The debate is set if you accept. Matthew picked up the telegram, reading Royce's bold words. Explore more at Novelbin. Calm. Are you ready to fight for Amarathia's future? Mr. President? Amber sat beside him, arms crossed. This is their moment to strike. Matt, they want to put you in a corner, to make you defend yourself while they push Royce as the bold new leader. Matthew set the telegram down and smirked. They made a mistake. Collins raised an eyebrow. Oh. Matthew looked up, his blue eyes burning with determination. They assume they can control the narrative in a debate, he said. But they forgot one thing. Amber leaned forward. What's that? Matthew smiled. I'm at my best when I'm standing in front of the people. He picked up his pen and signed the official acceptance letter. Tell Royce I'll see him on the debate stage. He will be the one who will choose what topic we should debate on. I'll give myself a handicap on this one. Feeling confident, sir. I like it. Very well. We will reach out to his team at once. Chapter 243. March 10th, 1897. Capitol Theater, Washington, D.C. The Capitol Theater was packed, its grand hall filled with politicians, journalists, and citizens who had traveled from across Amarathia to witness the most anticipated political event of the year. This was the debate, the moment that would determine the future of Amarathia. A massive stage had been set up with two podiums, each illuminated by the golden glow of the chandeliers above. The national flag hung high in the backdrop, a symbol of the country both men claimed to fight for. On one side stood President Matthew Hesh, his expression calm but sharp, his suit crisp, his posture straight. He had weathered political storms before, but this was different. This was not just about politics, this was a battle for Amarathia's future. Opposite him stood Charles Alden Royce, exuding confidence, his smirk unwavering. He adjusted his cuffs as he eyed the audience, knowing that tonight all eyes were on him. Between them stood moderator Edward Calloway, a veteran journalist known for his sharp questioning and refusal to let candidates dodge issues. The rules. Calloway cleared his throat, speaking into the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the great debate tonight. President Matthew Hesh and Mr. Charles Royce will present their visions for Amarathia's future. The audience quieted. The debate will have 3 rounds. Each candidate will have 5 minutes to present their stance, followed by a rebuttal. There will be no interruptions, and any attempts to derail the discussion will result in lost speaking time. Calloway turned to Royce. Mr. Royce, as per President Hesh's request, you have chosen the topics for tonight's debate. Please state them. Royce smiled, stepping up to his podium. The topics will be military strength, economic growth, and national identity. A murmur rippled through the audience. It was no surprise Royce had chosen battlegrounds where he could attack Hesh the hardest. Calloway nodded. We will begin with military strength. Mr. Royce, you have 5 minutes. Round 1. Military strength. Explore new worlds at Novelbin. Calm. Royce straightened his back, gripping the podium as he spoke. My fellow Amarathians, let's speak plainly. Our military is weaker now than it was 4 years ago under President Hesh. We have lost our standing on the world stage, our enemies do not fear us, and our allies do not respect us. The audience murmured as Royce continued. For years ago, we had an opportunity to solidify Amarathia's dominance, to assert our strength, to expand our influence. Instead, President Hesh hesitated. He spoke of peace when he should have spoken of power, and what has that hesitation cost us? He spread his arms dramatically. Our military budget has been slashed, our naval fleet sits idle, nations that once trembled at our might now mock us. A smattering of applause erupted from Royce's supporters. We cannot afford another 4 years of weakness. We need a leader who will restore Amarathia's military, who will not hesitate to take decisive action, and that is why I stand before you today. Royce stepped back, smug confidence radiating from him. Calloway turned to Hesh. Mr. President, your response? Hesh's rebuttal. Matthew took a measured breath, his blue eyes scanning the audience. He did not rush, let the silence stretch, forcing people to listen. Then he spoke. Mr. Royce speaks of strength, but let me ask you, what kind of leader defines strength by war? A pause. I did not weaken Amarathia's military, I strengthened it where it mattered. Before my presidency, this nation's military was a tool for conquest, used by corrupt men who sought power, not protection. The room fell silent. I rebuilt the military to defend this country, not to start reckless wars for personal gain. Under my leadership, we modernized our defenses, increased training, and prioritized security over senseless aggression. A few in the audience nodded. Let's talk facts, Mr. Royce, Hesh continued, his voice level but firm. You say I cut military spending. False. What I did was redirect funding from wasteful, outdated projects into advanced technology, intelligence, and strategic defense systems. Under my leadership, we built fortifications along our borders, strengthened our naval logistics, and improved our intelligence operations. He leaned forward. You talk about expansion, about dominance, but let me ask you this: what is the cost of your vision? How many lives would you throw away in pursuit of an empire? Royce's smirk wavered. And let's not forget, Hesh added, the war you wanted to start? The one that would have sent thousands of Amarathian soldiers to their deaths for nothing. The audience reacted, some murmuring, others outright clapping. I did not hesitate, Mr. Royce. I made a choice to protect this nation rather than throw it into an unnecessary conflict. Matthew stepped back, his point made. Calloway nodded. Let's move to round 2, economic growth. Mr. Royce, you may begin. Round 2, economic growth. Royce recovered quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, Amarathia's economy is stagnant. Wages have barely increased, industries are choked by overregulation, and job creation has slowed. He gestured toward the audience. You feel it, business owners, factory workers, traders, all of you suffer under the weight of Hesh's policies. He turned toward Hesh. Your administration promised economic prosperity, yet what have we received? Higher taxes, stricter regulations, stagnant trade deals. Royce smiled, knowing his words were landing. If you elect me as your president, I will unleash Amarathia's full potential: lower taxes, deregulation, investment in industries that drive progress. I will return this country to its rightful place as an economic superpower. Loud cheers erupted from his supporters. Calloway turned to Hesh. Your response, Mr. President? Hesh's rebuttal. Matthew stepped up. Mr. Royce calls it stagnation, I call it rebuilding from corruption. A pause. My administration took on the corrupt institutions that drained Amarathia's economy for their own profit. We cracked down on monopolies, we ensured workers received fair wages, and we protected Amarathian industries from exploitation. He folded his arms. My opponent wants to undo that progress. He wants to return power to the same elites who bled this nation dry. The crowd reacted, some clapping, some murmuring. I did not slow Amarathia's economy, I cleaned it, and if given 4 more years, I will continue to build an economy that benefits everyone, not just the privileged few. The audience roared in approval. Chapter 244. The debate had ended, but the night was far from over. As per the structure of the event, both candidates now had the opportunity to formally present their policies and platforms to the public. This was where the people would truly judge their plans and decide who would lead Amarathia into the future. The audience, still buzzing from the heated exchanges of the debate, remained in their seats. Some murmured amongst themselves, others scribbled notes. But everyone was waiting for one clear vision of the future. Moderator Edward Calloway stepped forward, raising his hand to quiet the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, we have heard both President Hesh and Mr. Royce debate key national issues. Now, we will allow each candidate to formally outline their policies and vision for Amarathia should they be elected. A hush fell over the theater. Calloway turned toward Royce. Mr. Royce, as the challenger, you may begin. Charles Royce stepped up to the podium, his confidence unshaken. He had come prepared, and he knew exactly what message he needed to send. My fellow Amarathians, he began, his voice smooth and powerful. For too long, this country has been denied its rightful place as the world's leading power. We have been stagnant, trapped under policies that limit our potential, restrict our industries, and weaken our military. He gripped the edges of the podium, scanning the audience. My presidency will change that. Royce turned to the first pillar of his platform. The Amarathian economy is shackled by government interference, regulations, taxes, restrictions. All of them prevent businesses from thriving and workers from achieving true prosperity. A small cheer rose from his supporters. My administration will cut unnecessary regulations and lower taxes to allow our industries to grow without limits. Under my leadership, Amarathia will become an economic powerhouse, unchallenged in trade and industrial dominance. He let the words sink in before moving to his next point. As for our military, the world is changing, Royce continued. Other nations are growing stronger, and yet, our military has been weakened under the current administration. He took a step forward, his expression sharp. We will rebuild our navy, expand our army, and make Amarathia a nation that no foreign power would dare challenge. More cheers erupted. Royce then moved on to his final and most controversial point. Other nations look at us and see hesitation. They see weakness. This will change under my presidency. He pointed directly at the audience. I will ensure that Amarathia is feared and respected. I will make this country an empire of strength. A loud applause followed from his supporters. While Hesh's camp sat in silence, Royce turned back toward Callaway. This is the future I offer, a powerful, wealthy, and unstoppable Amarathia. He stepped back from the podium, his speech delivered. Experience news stories with Novelbin. Calm. The moderator gave the crowd a moment to settle before turning to President Hesh. Mr. President, you may present your platform. Matthew Hesh stepped up to the podium, calm and composed. He did not radiate the fiery aggression of Royce, but he had something far more important: conviction. He glanced at Royce for a brief second before addressing the crowd. My fellow Amarathians, he began, his tone firm. Tonight you have heard two very different visions for our nation. He let his words hang for a moment before continuing, one based on conquest and unchecked power, the other, my vision, based on progress and stability. Hesh turned to the first pillar of his platform. Amarathia's economy does not belong only to the elite, it belongs to every citizen. He gestured toward the audience. That means workers, farmers, small business owners, and families who rely on fair wages and protections. My administration has already raised wages, ended corrupt monopolies, and ensured businesses grow without exploitation. A few nods from the crowd. My opponent speaks of deregulation, but we all know what that means. It means handing power back to the same men who tried to rob this nation. A murmur spread through the audience. Hesh moved to his next point. The military, I have made Amarathia safer than it has ever been. His words were measured, direct. Our borders are secure, our intelligence has never been stronger, our defense forces are ready. He locked eyes with Royce for a brief second. But what I will not do is send thousands of our soldiers to die for an empire we do not need. The crowd was split. Some cheered, others remained still. If re-elected, I will continue to invest in modern defense, advanced technology, and national security, but I will not waste Amarathian lives for ambition. The sharp contrast between his and Royce's vision was clear. Hesh then moved to his final and most crucial point. Amarathia does not need to be feared, it needs to be respected. His voice rose slightly, commanding attention. Power is not found in brutality, it is found in leadership. It is found in our ability to unite, to innovate, to build a nation so great that the world looks to us not in fear, but in admiration. He let the words settle before delivering his final statement. My opponent promises a future of domination. I promise a future of strength built on justice, prosperity, and stability. A wave of applause erupted, not as wild as Royce's, but solid and determined. As Hesh stepped back, Callaway returned to the center of the stage. You have now heard both candidates outline their policies and visions. The choice ahead is clear. The audience remained divided. Some were electrified by Royce's promise of power, others were reassured by Hesh's commitment to stability. Callaway allowed the applause to fade before stepping forward once more, his expression serious as he addressed the audience. Amarathians, we have now heard the candidates' visions for the future of our nation, but a leader is not defined only by speeches or promises. A leader must be able to answer the concerns of the people directly. The room grew silent. As such, we will now proceed to the final segment of tonight's event, the question and answer portion. A murmur spread through the crowd. Callaway turned to both candidates. Mr. Royce, President Hesh, are you ready to be tested? Chapter 245. The murmur in the audience swelled as the anticipation for the final segment of the night grew. The debate had been tense, the policy presentations clear and direct, but now came the most unpredictable part, the question and answer portion. Moderator Edward Callaway stood at the center of the stage, his expression neutral but commanding. This portion will allow members of the audience, selected at random, to pose direct questions to the candidates. The candidates will have 2 minutes to respond, and there will be no rebuttals. The rules were simple, but the impact could be significant. Unlike rehearsed speeches, this would test their ability to think on their feet. A theater usher stepped forward, carrying a microphone. Calloway gestured toward the front rows. We will begin with our first question. Please state your name and your question clearly. A man in his mid-40s stood, adjusting his vest before taking the microphone. His voice was strong, carrying through the hall. My name is Harold Greaves. I'm a factory worker from New Manchester, and my question is this. Both of you have spoken about the economy, but what will you do to ensure that ordinary workers like me can have stable wages and fair working conditions? Calloway turned to Royce. Mr. Royce, you may answer first. Royce nodded, offering a charming smile. Mr. Greaves, I appreciate your hard work, and let me be very clear, under my presidency, your wages will increase. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. For too long, businesses have been burdened by excessive regulations which have made it harder to expand, harder to hire more workers, and yes, harder to pay higher wages. My plan is simple. Cut unnecessary restrictions, allow industries to grow freely, and you will see a booming economy where wages naturally rise because businesses will thrive. He turned slightly toward Hesh. The current administration believes in controlling the economy from the top. I believe in freeing it for you. Your next journey awaits at Novelbin. Royce stepped back, his supporters clapping. Calloway nodded and turned to Hesh. Mr. President, your response? Matthews stepped forward, his posture firm. Mr. Greaves, I respect your hard work, and I want to tell you something very directly. Your wages are not low because of regulations. They are low because for years, business owners were given all the power while workers were left behind. A stronger reaction from the audience this time. My administration raised the minimum wage, implemented fair labor laws, and ensured that business owners could not exploit their workers. That was not government interference, that was protecting the people. He gestured toward Royce. My opponent speaks of freeing industries, but let's be honest, what he means is returning power to the same men who would cut your wages the first chance they get. I believe in a strong economy, but not one that depends on sacrificing the worker. More applause, this time from his supporters. Calloway let the reaction settle before moving on. Our second question. A young woman stood, gripping the microphone tightly. She looked nervous but determined. My name is Eleanor Dawson. My question is for both of you. We've heard a lot about the military tonight, but my husband is in the army and I want to know, if elected, will you commit to supporting soldiers even after they leave service? Veterans have been forgotten for too long. Calloway gestured toward Hesh. Mr. President, you may begin. Matthew's gaze softened. Mrs. Dawson, first, let me say this: thank you. Thank you to your husband for his service, and thank you to you for standing by him. The sacrifices made by our soldiers and their families should never be ignored. A few nods from the audience. My administration has already taken steps to protect our veterans. We have increased pensions, improved healthcare access, and expanded mental health services for returning soldiers, but I will be honest, we can do more. If re-elected, I will push for a Veteran Support Act to ensure that no soldier is left behind after they take off their uniform. He met Eleanor's gaze. Amarathia is built on the backs of those who defend it, and I promise you, Mrs. Dawson, I will fight for them as fiercely as they have fought for us. Applause, steady and firm. Calloway turned to Royce. Mr. Royce, your response? Royce, ever the politician, nodded respectfully. Mrs. Dawson, I also want to express my gratitude for your husband's service. Our soldiers are the backbone of this nation, and that is precisely why I believe we need a stronger military. His tone shifted, but let's be clear, veterans are struggling today because our military has been weakened. When a nation does not prioritize its armed forces, the government stops investing in those who serve. He spread his arms slightly. As president, I will expand our military budget, ensuring higher pay for active soldiers, better resources, and post-service benefits. The best way to support veterans is to ensure they serve in a nation that truly values them. More applause, mostly from his supporters. Calloway nodded. Next question. An older man with silver hair stood, his cane resting beside him. His voice was deep and commanding. My name is Samuel Kent. I've lived through wars, political turmoil, and all the promises made by leaders. I want to ask you both one thing: what will Amarathia look like in 4 years if you win? The audience hushed. Calloway turned to Royce. Mr. Royce, you may begin. Royce inhaled deeply, then smiled. Mr. Kent, for years from now, Amarathia will be the strongest nation in the world. A pause. Our economy will be unmatched, our industries limitless, our military respected and feared. We will no longer be a nation hesitant to take action. We will lead, we will dominate. He stepped forward. I offer Amarathia a future of power, prosperity, and progress. If you elect me, I will reshape this nation into an empire worthy of history. Thunderous applause. Calloway turned to Hesh. Mr. President? Matthew took a steady breath. Mr. Kent, for years from now, Amarathia will be stronger, but not because of fear. He let that sink in. Our economy will be thriving not by unchecked greed, but because every Amarathian, from factory workers to farmers, will share in our success. He pointed toward the audience. Our military will be prepared and modernized not for conquest, but to protect every citizen in this country. Another pause, and Amarathia will not be feared. We will be respected because we will be a beacon of justice, prosperity, and integrity. The audience reacted not as loudly as Royce's, but it was clear Hesh's words had weight. Calloway allowed the applause to settle. That concludes our question and answer segment. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard both candidates. The choice ahead is yours. The audience remained divided, some standing in excitement, others murmuring amongst themselves as the night ended. Both candidates knew this election would not be won on words alone. The real battle was in the election. Chapter 246. March 12, 1897. Undisclosed location. The Order's War Room. The dimly lit chamber, hidden beneath an unassuming estate on the outskirts of Amsterdam, was alive with hushed voices. Around a long mahogany table sat the most powerful men in Amarathia: political elites, industrial magnates, military officers, and media barons. These were the architects of the nation's fate. The men who had operated from the shadows for decades. At the head of the table sat Gideon Langston, the Grand Chancellor of the Order of the Phoenix Society. His presence alone commanded the room. The flickering gas lamps cast sharp shadows across his face, highlighting the cold calculation in his gaze. He tapped his fingers on the table, a silent demand for attention. The murmurs ceased. The debate has concluded. The election battle has begun. Now, tell me, how do we ensure Royce wins? The strategy: sabotage, deception. Cornelius Voss, the shipping magnate whose fortune funded much of the Order's covert activities, leaned forward. Public perception is shifting in our favor, but it is not enough. Hesh's supporters are stubborn. He still has the trust of the working class, and we cannot allow that to hold. So, we take it from him, interjected Victor Kessler, the Order's master strategist, a former intelligence officer. Kessler was an expert in political warfare. He placed a map of Amarathia on the table, dotted with markers indicating key cities and districts. Our objective is threefold, Kessler continued, his voice sharp. First, we erode faith in Hesh's leadership. Second, we create chaos that only Royce can fix. And third, we manipulate the election process to secure our victory. Langston steepled his fingers. Details? Kessler nodded, tapping his pointer finger against the map. Step 1. Economic panic. He gestured to Cornelius Voss, who smirked. We will stage a coordinated disruption of Amarathia's supply chains, delays at the ports, strikes at key factories, and sudden shortages of essential goods. Let the people feel uncertainty. Let them feel that their livelihoods are at risk. Langston nodded. And Hesh? He will be forced to address the crisis, and when he does, we will ensure his actions are perceived as weak and ineffective. The press is already prepared to paint him as an out-of-touch leader incapable of restoring order, Voss explained. Kessler continued. Step 2. Fear and instability. He glanced at Jonathan Hawthorne, the Order's most influential senator. Riots will break out in key cities, carefully staged, strategically placed, workers protesting unfair wages, citizens angry over food shortages. But Herace the Twistwee will escalate it further with calculated acts of violence, and then. Kessler smirked. We blame Hesh's administration for failing to maintain law and order. Langston's gaze darkened. Who will incite the violence? Operatives disguised as protesters, Kessler said simply. A few well-placed incidents, perhaps a government building burned, clashes between protesters and police, and the people will cry out for change. And Royce? Langston asked. He will present himself as the solution. While Hesh scrambles to explain, Royce will step forward with a clear plan to restore order and economic prosperity. He will be the man who takes control when Hesh cannot. Langston nodded approvingly. And the election itself? Lewis Whitmore, a prominent banker and order financier, leaned in. Even with public sentiment shifting, we must ensure the numbers work in our favor. We have allies in key election districts: clerks, ballot counters, even governors. They will make adjustments where necessary. Define adjustments, Langston demanded. In targeted areas, voter rolls will be modified. Hesh's strongest districts will experience technical errors in their ballot counts. Royce's districts will have an unusually high turnout, courtesy of absentee ballots that just happen to be misplaced until after the counting begins. Victor Kessler smirked, and in the event of a close race, our final card is the courts. Jonathan Hawthorne nodded. If it comes to legal disputes, we have enough judges in our pocket to swing key decisions in Royce's favor. We will challenge every result that does not benefit us, creating a legal battle that Hesh cannot win. Langston sat back, absorbing the details of their plan. What about Hesh himself? He asked finally. Kessler's expression darkened. If Hesh starts getting desperate, we push him into making mistakes, and if that doesn't work. He let the words hang. Langston's eyes narrowed. Elimination? Kessler didn't blink. Only as a last resort. An accident or an assassination attempt by a radical could sway the public completely in Royce's favor, but it's a dangerous move. You must be certain it will work before we proceed. Langston tapped the table twice. Proceed with the plan. I want the economy in turmoil within the month. The riots must begin shortly after. When the people cry out for change, Royce will answer them. A silence fell over the room. They were about to change Amarathia forever. March 15, 1897, the first wave of economic disruption began. Shipments at major ports were mysteriously delayed. Factory workers suddenly went on strike in industrial cities. The stock market dipped as investors panicked over uncertainty. Newspapers carried bold headlines. Economic crisis looms over Amarathia. Is the Hesh administration failing? Food shortages in major cities. Government struggles to respond. Hesh's administration scrambled to manage the crisis, but before they could act, the second phase hit. Protests erupted. At first, they seemed genuine, workers demanding better wages. Citizens frustrated with rising prices, but soon the demonstrations turned violent. A government building in New Manchester was set ablaze. Police clashed with rioters in Amsterdam City. Royce took to the stage. This is what Hesh's leadership has brought: use instability, chaos, weakness. He delivered his speech as if it were spontaneous, but it had been carefully planned. He presented himself as the man who could restore order. Amarathia deserves better. Elect me and I will end this madness. The people listened. March 20th, 1897, in key districts, voter registration issues surfaced. Pro-Hesh areas reported missing ballots. Royce's districts saw record-high turnout. Manufactured, of course. Meanwhile, the press intensified its attacks on Hesh. Hesh's presidency in crisis. Can he still lead? Is Hesh's weakness to blame for Amarathia's decline? The damage was spreading. March 25, 1897. Hesh was losing ground. His administration fought to restore order, but every move he made was countered by sabotage and manipulated narratives. And then, in the dead of night, a bomb detonated at a campaign office in New Manchester. The order-controlled media immediately placed the blame on radical pro-Hesh extremists. The people were afraid. The nation was spiraling, and Royce? He was waiting, ready to restore order. In the war room, Langston watched the chaos unfold. He turned to Kessler. When do we move to the final phase? Kessler smiled. Soon. The fall of Matthew Hesh had begun. Chapter 247. March 26, 1897. The White House, Washington, D.C. The air inside the Oval Office was heavy, thick with tension as President Matthew Hesh paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. He had barely slept in the past few days. Not with everything unraveling around him. The bombing in New Manchester was the final straw. His campaign office, a place filled with dedicated workers and volunteers, had been reduced to rubble overnight. People had died, good people. And the media wasted no time blaming his own supporters for the act. It was a lie, a carefully orchestrated lie, and Matthew knew it, but proving it? That was another matter entirely. Across the room, Collins, his chief of staff, leaned against the desk, scanning a stack of newspapers with a scowl. The story is everywhere, Collins muttered, slamming one down onto the desk. They're pushing the radical pro-Hesh extremists' angle hard. Royce's camp is already calling for immediate action against domestic threats. Matthew exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. This isn't just an election battle anymore. His voice was low, controlled, but Collins could hear the anger beneath it. This is a full-scale attack. Collins nodded. We're being outplayed, Matt. The crisis is spreading. The reports were grim. Food shortages were worsening in major cities. Supplies that had once moved effortlessly across the country were now inexplicably delayed, disrupted, or outright missing. Riots had broken out in several districts. New Manchester, Amsterdam City, and Philadelphia were the worst hit. The police were overwhelmed, and governors, some under Royce's influence, were refusing to deploy the National Guard to restore order. Election offices in key states were experiencing unprecedented technical issues, making voter registration difficult for Hesh's supporters. And Royce? He was everywhere, every radio station, every newspaper, every public, even that was preaching law and order, hammering the idea that Hesh had lost control. Collins grabbed another newspaper and read aloud, "A presidency in collapse. Can Hesh survive the crisis?" He tossed it onto the pile. That's the Amsterdam Post. Another one, Amarathia at a breaking point, a weak president in the face of chaos. Collins shook his head. This one's from the Capital Times. He didn't need to read more. The headlines were all the same. Matthew clenched his jaw. They control the narrative. Collins nodded, and they're using it to bury us. The situation was spiraling, and Matthew knew it wouldn't take much more before the people turned on him completely. His advisors, some of the more conservative ones, had already suggested martial law as an option. It was drastic, dangerous, but the alternative was losing control entirely. Just then, the door burst open and Attorney General Daniel Whitaker entered, his face tight with urgency. "Mr. President, the governor of New Manchester is demanding immediate federal intervention," Moreno reported. "The riots have spread, and local law enforcement can't contain them. They need reinforcements." Matthew turned to Collins. "Do we have National Guard units ready?" Collins hesitated. "Yes, but deploying them will be politically costly." "I don't care about politics," Matthew shot back. "If cities are burning, we put out the fire." Moreno shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, some of the states where the riots are worst? They're controlled by governors who back Royce. If you send federal troops, they'll claim you're using force against the people. They'll paint you as a tyrant." Matthew clenched his fists. It was a trap. If he didn't act, the violence would worsen. If he did, Royce's allies in the media would spin it against him. Matthew exhaled and walked over to the window, staring out at the White House lawn. He couldn't keep reacting. He needed to strike back. "We go public." Collins and Moreno exchanged glances. "Go public with what?" Collins asked. Matthew turned back. "The truth. Matt, the press won't run anything we give them. They're in Royce's pocket. Then we take it straight to the people." Collins' eyes narrowed. "You want to bypass the media?" Matthew nodded. "We go live. It'll address the nation directly. No press filters, just me speaking to the people." Collins hesitated, then slowly nodded. "It could work. If you control the message, you take some power away from Royce." That evening, Matthew sat behind his desk, a single radio microphone in front of him. The nation was listening. "My fellow Amarathians, I come to you not as a politician, but as your president, your leader, in a time of great difficulty." He paused, letting the silence settle. "I will not lie to you. This nation is in crisis. Economic disruption, riots, and violence have shaken our cities, and I know many of you are afraid. I know you wonder if Amarathia's best days are behind us." A deep breath. "Let me be clear. This crisis is not natural. It is not a coincidence. It has been created by those who wish to divide and manipulate you." The words were sharp, direct. "Ask yourself who benefits from this chaos? Who has taken advantage of your fear? Who has stepped forward to offer solutions while never explaining how we got here in the first place?" Matthew's voice remained steady, unwavering. "I have fought against corruption since the day I took office. I have challenged those who believe they are above the people, and now, in these final days before the election, they seek to break your faith in this administration by making you believe Amarathia is falling apart." A pause. "I will not allow it. I am deploying federal resources to restore order in our cities. I will ensure that every Amarathian has the right to vote, free from fear or manipulation, and I will not stand by while powerful men seek to tear this nation apart for their own gain." A final declaration. "Amarathia is strong, and together we will prove it." The reaction was immediate. Some praised him, calling it his strongest speech yet. Others accused him of conspiracy mongering, but one thing was clear: had taken the fight directly to Royce and the order, and they would not let it go unanswered. The real battle was just beginning. Chapter 248. March 27, 1897. Undisclosed location. The Order's war room. The radio broadcast had rattled them. Inside the dimly lit war room, the most powerful members of the Order of the Phoenix Society sat in silence, listening to the last echoes of Matthew Hesh's speech playing from a gramophone. The words had been measured, direct, and dangerously effective. He had done something they hadn't expected. He had spoken over the media, bypassing their control, and planted doubt in the minds of the people. When the speech ended, Gideon Langston, the Grand Chancellor, leaned forward, his expression unreadable. He turned to Victor Kessler, the Order's master strategist. "How much damage did he do?" Kessler exhaled sharply. "More than we anticipated." He adjusted his glasses before continuing. "Our plan was working perfectly. The riots, the economic disruption, the election sabotage, it was all shifting public opinion against him. But now," Langston pressed, "now we have a problem. The speech had disrupted their narrative. Cornelius Voss, the shipping magnate, drummed his fingers on the polished table. What's the public reaction so far? Kessler flipped through the reports, divided. He pointed to a series of documents. His supporters see him as standing firm in the face of crisis. They believe he's fighting against an orchestrated attack. His words gave them hope. Langston's jaw tightened, and the undecided voters? Kessler hesitated. That's where the real problem lies. He gestured to another report. Before the speech, polls showed Royce gaining significant momentum, but now? He tapped the paper. Some voters are hesitating. Langston's expression darkened. Hesh just made this election a real fight. Langston turned to Jonathan Hawthorne, one of the order's most influential senators. We can't let him control the narrative. What's the next move? Hawthorne smirked, already thinking ahead. We use his strength against him. Explain. Hawthorne leaned forward. Hesh framed himself as the victim of a conspiracy. Fine. Let's push that narrative further but twist it. We make him look like a delusional tyrant grasping at power. Langston raised an eyebrow. How? Hawthorne grinned. We accuse him of staging these crises himself. Silence fell over the room, then Victor Kessler chuckled. It's brilliant. Hawthorne continued. We plant the idea that the shortages, the riots, the attacks, it's all been orchestrated by Hesh to justify extreme government control. He becomes the villain, Kessler added, smirking, a desperate leader who will do anything to hold onto power. Langston nodded slowly, and Royce. Hawthorne spread his hands. He positions himself as the man who will restore normalcy, the sane choice, the calm leader Amarathia needs. Langston tapped his fingers against the table, thinking, then he stood, make it happen. March 28, 1897, the next morning, newspapers across Amarathia carried one shocking headline after another. Did President Hesh create this crisis to stay in power? A nation held hostage. Is the president behind the chaos? Insiders claim Hesh plans to declare martial law. The articles pushed the same narrative that Hesh was manufacturing a national crisis to manipulate the people. Radio stations echoed the claim. Pundits dissected every word of Hesh's speech, twisting its meaning, fueling the suspicion that he was the true architect of the nation's downfall. Inside the Oval Office, Collins stormed in, his face pale with frustration. They flipped it on us, Matt. Hesh was reading one of the headlines. He tossed the paper onto his desk. I expected them to hit back. Collins ran a hand through his hair. Not like this. They're making it seem like you're the one behind all of this, that you're the one burning Amarathia down. Matthew exhaled slowly. They're good. It'll give them that. Collins threw his hands up. Matt, this is dangerous. People are starting to believe it. Royce is already holding rallies, saying hell restore democracy. Matthew stood, his expression set in stone. Then we fight back. How? Collins challenged. We don't own the press. We don't control the radio. Matthew tapped his desk. But we have something they don't. Collins frowned. Which is? The truth. Matthew walked toward the telegraph office, his mind made up. He turned to Whitaker, the Attorney General. I want an official investigation launched into the election interference, the riots, and the economic sabotage. I want names. I want arrests. I want it done now. Whitaker hesitated. That's dangerous, Matt. If we go after them directly, Matthew cut him off. They declared war first. Whitaker nodded, then left to assemble his team, explore more stories at Novelbin. Calm. Collins watched him go. If we do this, it could escalate things beyond an election. Matthew locked eyes with him. It already has. March 30th, 1897, the government officially announced an investigation into election tampering. Economic sabotage and civil unrest. Royce's camp immediately called it a political witch hunt. The media rushed to paint it as a desperate move by a failing president, but Matthew didn't care. He was done playing defense. He was going after them. Back in the war room, Gideon Langston read the latest telegram. Hesh is pushing back. Victor Kessler smirked. Let him. Langston set the paper down. Is the final phase ready? Kessler nodded. Yes, if Hesh wants to fight, well, give him a war he can't win. The pieces were set, and soon, one way or another, the election would be decided. April 3rd, 1897, the White House, Washington, D.C. The storm had arrived. Matthew Hesh stood by the tall windows of the Oval Office. His hands clasped behind his back as he watched the city below. Washington, D.C. was restless. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and street discussions all revolved around the latest manufactured crisis, the so-called Hesh loyalist coup. The lies were piling up so fast that it was becoming difficult to discredit them all at once. Collins stormed into the room, face red with frustration, gripping a newspaper so tightly that the pages crumpled in his fist. They're saying you planned a coup, Matt. He threw the paper onto the desk. A goddamn coup. Matthew didn't move. He had seen the headlines. He had heard the radio broadcasts spinning stories about a fabricated plot to keep him in power. The narrative was simple. A secret group of Hesh loyalists had been exposed for plotting to interfere with the election results. Documents had been found. A whistleblower had come forward. Royce's allies were parading the story as proof that Hesh was willing to dismantle democracy to stay in office, and the worst part? Some people were starting to believe it. I swear if I find out who is doing this, I will make sure they'll never see a sunrise again. Chapter 249. April 5, 1897. The White House, Washington, D.C. Matthew Hesh had been fighting this war for months. He had expected lies, manipulation, and attacks, but not at this level. The order had gone beyond politics. They were dismantling Amarathia from the inside, piece by piece. The latest accusation that he was orchestrating a coup to remain in power was perhaps the most dangerous of all. Collins stormed into the Oval Office. Slamming a newspaper onto the desk, "They're saying you planned a coup, Matt." Matthew exhaled, scanning the bold letters across the front page. Hesh loyalists plotting to steal the election. President Hesh desperate or dangerous? He clenched his fists. They weren't just trying to steal the election, they were trying to make him the villain. "It's a trap," he muttered. Collins frowned. "What?" Matthew looked up. "They want me to react. If I lash out, if I do anything drastic, it makes their lies real." Collins groaned, running a hand through his hair. "So what, we just let them destroy your name?" Matthew's expression hardened. "No, we fight back, but we do it our way." April 6, 1897. Undisclosed location. The Order's War Room. Victor Kessler smirked, setting a new stack of reports on the table. Hesh is still standing. Impressive, but he's bleeding. Gideon Langston, the Grand Chancellor, leaned forward, his fingers interlocked. "Not enough. He needs to fall." Jonathan Hawthorne nodded. "We've turned the public against him, but it's not enough. The election is close, too close." Langston's jaw tightened. "Then it's time to end this." Kessler raised an eyebrow. "You mean?" Langston nodded. "Yes, the final move." A silence filled the room, then Kessler grinned. "If Hesh wants war, well, give him a war he can't win." April 7, 1897. Washington, D.C. National Archives. Fire. The flames engulfed the night sky. By morning, several key government records were gone, reduced to ash. Reports surfaced that documents linked to election fraud. Financial records exposing Royce's donors and intelligence reports on the order had all been lost. Collins burst into the Oval Office, his face pale. "They just erased everything." Matthew turned, his expression unreadable. "They burned the proof." Collins threw down another newspaper. "And they're blaming you for it." Matthew scanned the latest headline. "Hesh destroys evidence in archives. Fire. What is he hiding?" He exhaled sharply. "They're trying to suffocate us." Collins sat down, rubbing his temples. "What do we do now?" "That was our best leverage." Matthew stood still for a long moment, then turned to the telegraph office. "We go after them the way they're going after us." April 8, 1897. Royce's campaign rally. Amsterdam City. Royce stood before a massive crowd, basking in their applause. "Look at what's happening to our nation. We are under attack not from an enemy abroad, but from the corrupt man sitting in the White House." The audience roared. "Hesh and his loyalists have burned our institutions. They have sabotaged our democracy. But I promise you, if you elect me, I will put an end to this madness." The chant began. "Royce. Royce. Royce." Victor Kessler watched from the side of the stage, smirking. It was working. Hesh was being painted as the villain. April 9, 1897. The White House emergency meeting. Matthew sat at the head of the table, surrounded by his closest allies. Collins, Whitaker, and trusted officials. "Royce is getting bolder," Collins said. "His rallies are growing more aggressive. His supporters are becoming violent. The press is backing him completely." Whitaker nodded. "We need to act, Matt, fast." Matthew exhaled. "Then we expose them publicly on the biggest stage possible." April 10, 1897. National address. The final move. The cameras clicked as Matthew Hesh took the stage. "The nation was watching. Continue your adventure with Novelbin. Calm, my fellow Amarathians," he began. "For weeks, we have watched as this nation has been pulled into chaos, but today I am going to tell you the truth." A hush fell over the audience. "There is a force working in the shadows, orchestrating every crisis, every riot, every false accusation against this administration. They are not loyal to Amarathia, they are loyal only to their own power." Gasps rippled through the audience, and I am naming them. The tension in the room thickened. "The Order of the Phoenix Society." Silence. "This secret organization has controlled our politics for decades. They have sabotaged this election, manipulated the press, and framed this administration for crimes we did not commit, but today we fight back." He raised a thick folder. We have uncovered financial records tying members of Royce's campaign to the riots. We have intercepted messages proving their involvement in the destruction of government property, and we will not be silent anymore. The press erupted. April 10, 1897. Undisclosed location inside the Order's war room. Gideon Langston clenched his jaw as he listened to Hesch's speech play over the radio. Victor Kessler turned pale. He just named us. Hawthorne whispered, how the hell did he find out? Langston slammed his fist on the table. It doesn't matter, we silence him, now. Kessler hesitated. You mean? Langston's cold gaze settled on him. Assassination before he can prove anything. A heavy silence filled the room. April 10, 1897. The White House, Washington, D.C. The moment Matthew Hesch uttered the words, the Order of the Phoenix Society, the nation shifted inside the press room. Journalists were scrambling, some furiously scribbling notes, others whispering to each other in disbelief. The air was thick with shock. Matthew held up the thick folder, the proof. The cameras clicked rapidly. The radio broadcasts carried his words across Amarathia. The world was listening, but how did he get it? The answer had been hidden within the Order's own arrogance. April 5, 1897, 3 a.m. Undisclosed safe house, Washington, D.C. In a darkened room, a man sat nervously at a table, his fingers trembling against the surface. A thick stack of documents rested beside him. His coat was damp from the cold, his face drawn from exhaustion. He was a man the Order had trusted, a man who had been on the inside. His name was Frederick Langley. Once a high-ranking financial officer for Cornelius Voss, Langley had seen too much: the stolen funds, the hidden accounts, the quiet money trails leading back to Royce's campaign, and he was terrified. Across from him sat Collins, Whitaker, and 2 agents from the Justice Department. Matthew Hesch was not in the room, couldn't afford to be. Langley licked his lips, glancing at the men surrounding him. If they find out I'm here, I'm dead. Collins leaned forward. If you don't do this, the whole country is dead. Langley's hands clenched into fists. I have everything. The accounts, the memos, the letters exchanged between Royce's inner circle. They coordinated the riots, they paid off the press, they burned the archives. Whitaker's eyes narrowed. Can you prove it? Langley swallowed. Yes, I have everything documented, but you don't understand. These men don't just manipulate elections, they've killed for less than this. Collins nodded grimly. We understand. Langley wiped the sweat from his forehead. If I do this, I want protection, I need out. Whitaker exhaled. Well, see what we can do. Langley's eyes flashed with desperation. No, you don't get it. If they even suspect I talked, I won't make it to the election. Collins exchanged a glance with Whitaker, then he reached into his coat and slid a small leather-bound notebook across the table. Write everything down, every detail. If they come for you, we make sure this goes public. Langley hesitated, then, slowly, he picked up the pen. April 10, 1897. Present. That notebook, along with the forged contracts, the financial transfers, and the intercepted telegrams, was now in Matthew Hesch's hands. And the world was seeing it for the first time. He flipped the folder open and held up a document. This is a bank transfer, signed by Cornelius Voss himself, wiring funds to an account controlled by Charles Royce's campaign, money that was used to pay off activists who incited violence in Amarathia's largest cities. The press erupted. Matthew held up another page. This is an intercepted memo written by Jonathan Hawthorne giving direct instructions on how to plant false documents accusing my administration of election interference. The room was in chaos now, and then Matthew looked directly into the cameras. I am calling for the immediate arrest of Charles Royce and every conspirator involved in the scheme. The reporters were shouting questions. The nation was watching, but deep in the shadows, the Order was planning its next move, because now Hesch wasn't just their opponent, he was a target as the weight of the moment settled over him. Matthew Hesch sat alone in the Oval Office, staring at the folder of evidence that had just shaken the nation. His hands trembled slightly, though he wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion, stress, or the sheer magnitude of what he had just done. The door creaked open, and Amber stepped inside. She didn't say anything at first, she just walked over and sat beside him on the couch. The silence between them was heavy but comforting. Then, without a word, she reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. You did the right thing, Matt, she said softly. He let out a slow breath. It doesn't feel like it. Amber shook her head. That's because the fight isn't over yet, but you're not alone in this. Matthew looked at her, searching for doubt in her eyes, but he found none, just unwavering support. He swallowed hard, nodding. She leaned closer, resting her head on his shoulder. You're stronger than they think, and no matter what happens, I'm with you. For the first time that night, Matthew felt something other than exhaustion. He felt hope. Chapter 250. The order's war room. The mood inside the war room was tense. The radio had just finished replaying President Hesch's speech, and now the men around the table sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Gideon Langston's fingers tapped against the wooden surface, his mind racing. The order had planned for many things, but not for this. Hesch had named them in front of the entire country, exposed their influence, and presented evidence that could cripple them. Victor Kessler leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses. This is bad. Jonathan Hawthorne poured himself a drink, his hands steady despite the turmoil around him. Worse than bad, he just turned the public against us. Langston exhaled sharply. Then we need to remove him before he does any more damage. Cornelius Voss, the shipping magnate, frowned. An assassination? Langston nodded. There's no other option. If we let him continue, by tomorrow morning, every government agency will be investigating us. If we wait any longer, we lose everything. Kessler reached into his coat and pulled out a dossier. He placed it on the table and slid it toward Langston. Conrad Faust is already in Amarathia, Kessler said. He's done work for us before, silent, precise, and most importantly disposable. Langston opened the file. Inside was a photograph of a man with sharp features, dark eyes, and an expression devoid of emotion. Where's he now? Langston asked. Kessler smirked, waiting for our orders. If we give him the green light, he'll take care of Hesch before the sun sets tomorrow. Hawthorne swirled the whiskey in his glass. And how do we make sure Royce isn't implicated? Kessler leaned forward. That's the beauty of it. The assassin will be neutralized immediately after the attack. The narrative will be simple. Hesch was killed by a radical extremist, someone from within his own ranks. Curious about how he handled the election crisis. Langston stared at the photograph for a long moment, then he nodded. Do it. April 11, 1897, Conrad Faust was not a man who asked questions. He had been hired for a job, and that was all that mattered, sitting in a small apartment just outside Washington, D.C. He calmly cleaned his weapon, a modified bolt-action rifle designed for close-range precision. He had studied Hesch's routine, his public movements, and most importantly, his scheduled rally later that day. The plan was simple. Faust would pose as a journalist in the press section, blending in with the crowd. When Hesch stepped forward to shake hands with his supporters, he would fire a single shot to the heart. Before anyone could react, an order operative stationed nearby would eliminate him, ensuring there were no loose ends, no witnesses, no interrogations. Just another assassination that would go down as an unfortunate act of political violence. April 11, 1897, thousands of supporters gathered in the square, waving Amarathian flags, chanting for the president. Despite the turmoil in recent weeks, despite the scandals, the false accusations, and the smear campaigns, Matthew Hesch still stood strong. He took the stage, adjusting his coat as the crowd erupted in cheers. Collins stood a few feet behind him, watching the scene with wary eyes. The security presence had been increased after the revelations about the order, but something still felt off. Collins leaned toward one of the Secret Service agents. I want extra eyes on the press section. The agent nodded and relayed the command. In the crowd, Conrad Faust moved into position. He lifted his camera, pretending to adjust the lens, but his real focus was on Hesch. His hand slipped into his coat, fingers brushing against the cold steel of his weapon. Just as he began to pull it out, something pressed against the small of his back. Don't move, a voice whispered. Faust froze. A hand grabbed his wrist, forcing it away from the weapon. A second later, two men in plain suits flanked him. Pressing closer, Secret Service, one of them murmured, "You're coming with us." Faust didn't struggle. He had been caught, and he knew there was no way out. The assassination had failed. April 11, 1897, the moment Conrad Faust's arrest hit the newspapers, the order knew they were in trouble inside their war room. Langston read the headline aloud. Presidential assassination attempt foiled, foreign mercenary captured. Hawthorne cursed under his breath. How the hell did they know? Kessler's face was pale. Someone must have tipped them off. Langston clenched his jaw, or Hesch was already expecting us to make a move. Voss wiped sweat from his forehead. This is bad, really bad. If Faust talks, he'll lead them straight to us. Kessler shook his head. No, he won't. Faust is a professional. He won't betray his employers. Langston wasn't convinced. And what if he does? What if they break him? No one had an answer. For the first time, the order felt real fear. April 12, 1897. News of the assassination attempt spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered outside the White House, demanding answers. The press speculated wildly who was behind it. Was it a foreign government? A rogue faction? Then Hesch addressed the nation. My fellow Amarathians, today an attempt was made on my life. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with determination. But I am still here, and I will not back down. He raised a document. The man who attempted to take my life was hired, and we have reason to believe he was working for the same people who have been orchestrating the chaos in our country. Read latest stories on Novelbin. Calm gasps rippled through the press. The Order of the Phoenix Society is behind this, and I am ordering the immediate arrest of those involved. The war had escalated. April 12, 1897, inside the war room, Langston knew they were out of time. The government was closing in. Hesh had survived. Hawthorne took a deep breath. We have one move left. Langston stared at him. Go on. Hawthorne exhaled. If we can't remove Hesh through assassination, we remove him through force. Langston narrowed his eyes. You mean a coup? Hawthorne nodded. Yes, if we don't act now, we'll be the ones behind bars. Langston looked around the room. The men who had once controlled the nation were now fighting for their own survival. It was time for their final gamble. April 13, 1897. The order was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. Armed operatives loyal to the order began moving into key positions around the capital. Rogue military officers, bribed politicians, and corrupt police officials were given their orders. By nightfall, Washington, D.C. would be under siege.